Welcome. So thank you very much for coming today to join me on my webinar, Letting Go of Fear. And if we haven't met yet, my name is Michelle Nagel, and I am known as America's #1 resilience expert. And resilience is something that we can absolutely use, especially right now. 2020 will go down in the history books as the most astonishingly challenging year for the majority of people on the planet at the moment. So I love supporting people who are motivated to change their lives by realizing and releasing themselves from fear. There's all sorts of things to be afraid of. It's like, do I wear a mask or do I not wear a mask? If I wear a mask, then I've got, problems with breathing in my carbon dioxide. And if I don't wear a mask, then I'm at risk for getting this virus, which is, nobody knows anything about, except that it's a scary one. Or, the entire country has been shut down, and therefore we don't have a lot of people who are working right now. At the beginning, in March, I remember that some of my clients would come to me and they were really excited because they weren't working right at the moment, and they felt that they could take that time off for working on themselves and getting rid of some of their own issues, because the economic stimulus check was helping them. And so they were able to do that. So I had this big flood of people who came in because they were ready to work on themselves. They were ready to make the changes that they wanted to make in their lives. But as time went on and places didn't open back up and people got laid off and companies closed and all of the economic crisis, there's a lot of fear going on. If there's fear for people, it's like, am I going to be able to continue paying my mortgage or my rent? Am I going to be able to continue eating? Those are all valid fears. They're all very real. And for some reason, people think that as soon as it gets to be like midnight at December 31st, all of a sudden everything is going to change and be different. And 2021 is going to be so much better. But there's no guarantee of that. We can always hope for that, but there is absolutely no guarantee. So I'm excited that you have come today to learn how to remove the fear-related compromises from your life so that you can begin to experience and achieve all of your goals and aspirations. And so if you have any questions during our time together, go ahead and go into either the chat or raise your hand or whatever, so that I can, excuse my dog, so that I can have an interaction with you and answer some questions that you have. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and then I'm going to make my picture go away, but obviously I will still be here because you'll hear me talking. And we'll start with this. So again, welcome. This is the letting go of fear. And fear comes from so many different places. It could even be the fear of something not happening that you really, truly, desperately want to happen. So it may be that you have a goal in mind, or you have a relationship goal, for example, or perhaps maybe a career goal, that you have this deep fear that it's not going to happen for you. So it doesn't always have to be the outside stuff. It can definitely be the inside stuff as well. So, okay, there we go. So there's our welcome. So the difference between anxiety versus fear is, so over 40 million people in the US alone suffer from anxiety-related disorders, according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. So that means that 18.1% of the adult population will experience overwhelming fear and dread associated with anxiety at some point in their life. Now, I have been anxious before in the past, but until I had suffered an extreme betrayal by a family member, I had never had an anxiety attack. So now it's like, oh my goodness, because I used to think, what's wrong with you people? It's not that bad. And now I get it, because the anxiety attacks that I have had are they're debilitating. And so now it's like, don't ever make fun of anybody, I guess, or the way they're feeling, because you'll feel it sometime. And fear is a concept that might seem like a similar sensation as anxiety, but it's generally considered that anxiety is used to define an ongoing sense of dis-ease, not being at ease, in other words, or worry about areas of life that may not present themselves as immediately threatening. Fear is what you feel in a scary situation. Anxiety is not. Fear is a sudden, jolting, and debilitating reflex response. So anxiety is less noticeable, recurring, and ultimately it can prove to be a whole lot more problematic in the way that it interferes with everyday life. So if you look at it this way, depression is living in the past, anxiety is living in the future. And being present is when you're stable and grounded. So the impact both fear and anxiety can have on all areas of life is huge. And it's not until we do a little reflection and introspection that we realize that anxiety is a compilation of fears we're unable to acknowledge and effectively express when they present themselves. So anxiety is actually fear of the future, fear of something happening, fear of our imagination. If you have a really active imagination, you can come up with all sorts of incredible scenarios and then be anxious and frightened about them. And so that's, you can always go to like Psychology Today. There's fear versus anxiety will help you with that. So what happens in your body when you're afraid? Where do you feel it when you're afraid? You know, there are terms that we have that we talk about our body all the time with connection to our emotion, but for some reason when we start thinking about emotions, we kind of separate them from our body, but they can't be separated because it's a chemical response in the body, and emotions are molecules that run through the body, and so they have to be acknowledged as part of the body process. And so let's talk about the physical aspect of fear. We've talked about, you know, people will say things like, I just had this clench in my gut, or, you know, this gripping in my heart, or the frog in my throat, or I can't get past this lump in my throat. So the physical aspect of the emotions of fear, we've all felt them at some point in our life. The commonly observed sensation of fear occurs in response to an external stimulus and causes the amygdala in the brain to release a hormone called cortisol. And if you've got cortisol is normal, it's supposed to be there. But if you have too much of it, it begins to cause all sorts of things like belly fat that you can't get rid of because it's trying to protect the organs. It's trying to pad the organs against imminent threat or imminent death is what the body is thinking is going on, that it produces that much cortisol. If you have too much cortisol in your body, it's called the death hormone, because if you have too much, it's going to cause all sorts of problems with those internal organs. Cortisol is also known as the fight or flight hormone. It's what causes our bodies to respond unconsciously and elicit anticipation of danger or attack from an external source. From the amygdala, cortisol then travels to every muscle in the body and causes them to activate and tense up in a fear response as the unconscious physical body prepares to protect itself from attack. So you stop breathing. If you notice when you're frightened or anxious, you're only breathing from like the top third of your lungs. Because if you have the presence of mind to be able to look at an experience and going, wow, I've really got a problem here. I'm frightened or I'm anxious, and how far am I breathing anyway? You'll notice it's only the top third of your lungs. That's because the body shuts down the fight or flight mechanism in the back of the brain, shuts down your breathing so that you are prepared to run, like startle, like when you come up on maybe a deer or something, or a wild animal somewhere and they don't see you at first. And you can even do this to your dog at home or your cat. They don't see you, and then when they do, there's that startle mechanism. That's why you only breathe in the top portion of your lungs, because you've got to be able to startle and run immediately. So physically, Cortisol increases the release of glucose to the bloodstream, primarily as a way to increase energy levels in immediate response to a dangerous stimulant. The trouble with this in today's age is that not every stimulus represents a real danger, meaning that the glucose, which gets sent into the bloodstream, remains unused over time and can build up, which then causes diabetes. This is why stress, anxiety, and unprocessed fears can actually be at the root of many physiological issues, such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and a whole lot more, especially the gut issues. Another function of cortisol is to assist the body to regain homeostasis after a period of stress, fear, or imbalanced release of hormones. So if you're constantly in the state of flight, fight, flight, or flight, those three words that are really hard to say if you try to say them fast, if you're constantly in that state, then your cortisol levels never go down. They're always there. They're always pumping it into your bloodstream so that you have the capacity to be able to react to whatever dangerous thing is going on in your world. And it may only be a perceived danger. And if you have a history of abuse as a child, childhood abuse, you're going to have more cortisol pumping through your system than most people do if you haven't dealt with those issues that have that you've been programmed for back there. Because your life, if somebody who's not had a lot of adverse childhood experiences are going to look at the world a whole lot different than somebody who has had a lot of adverse childhood experiences. So the trouble with the fight or flight reflex in today's society is the fears we have evolved to protect ourselves have also evolved. Unless you live in my town, you're not really likely to find a bear when you walk out the door. In my town, I do all the time. But I'm also used to it. And so I know that they're there. I know to look for them. And so they actually don't frighten me. It's kind of, I see a bear and I just go, oh, a bear. And then make sure that I do all of the protective things so that he and I don't interact with each other incorrectly, and the bear just kind of looks over at me like, oh, a human, and we go on our way. So, but that's what our bodies were evolved for. If you live in a city that isn't in the mountains, you're probably less likely to have bears wandering through your streets, but who knows, with COVID shutting down, all sorts of strange animals have been wandering through. So when our ancestors were triggered to run in flight from immediate threatening predators, today's reality is not quite as dangerous. Cortisol is released in everyday situations which are not life-threatening, like dreading work meetings, anticipating spending time with family, and we're coming up on the holidays, so this is a real thing for a lot of people. Or worst of all, taking public transport. Some people are afraid to get on a train or a bus. And with COVID, people are terrified to get on a train, bus, or a plane. Our bodies still respond to these situations in the same ways, using excess amounts of energy as we enter into this protective mode. So we all have what are called energy units. Every day, every morning, you wake up with a certain number of energy units, and they get expended on all sorts of things during the day. And that's why you may end up being like totally wiped out by noon or earlier, maybe 2 hours after you get up, because all of your energy expenditures are being given out and then you have nothing left. So the human body hasn't yet learned to differentiate between the dangers of getting hit by a car and falling or failing an exam. Both things elicit the same response in the brain, and as such, our bodies are overstimulated and flooded with unnecessary hormones. So the result is unnecessary and unhelpful levels of stress. So what's the lesson here? First of all, forgive your body for its evolutionary assumptions. It's not your fault that those responses have become routine, but the reality behind our fear response is that we must train our minds to react differently, to notice when you feel anxious. So when you do feel anxious, take an honest look at the situation, try to re-engage the thinking mind, which when you go into fight or flight, the thinking mind is shut down because you don't need to think in order to run. So you have to breathe in. And if you can breathe and get the breath lower than the top third of your lungs, down into your belly, breathe down into your belly, then the thinking brain will be able to kick back in again. And at that point, then you take an honest look at the situation and decide if your body's reaction to it is justified or not. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's appropriate. Sometimes there's, you get this creepy feeling when you're walking through a parking lot. Pay attention. It's important to do that. So this is the beginning, though, of letting go of your fears. If you take the time to actually go, it takes just seconds to do this. It's like, ooh, I feel really anxious. I'm not breathing. Okay, breathe. Now, is there a reason that I should be anxious? Is there something that justifies this response? It doesn't take very long. It took me longer to explain it than it does to actually do it, but it's extremely helpful for you. So if we follow the guidelines set out in that last picture and acknowledge the truth of our fears, some things, as I said, are very appropriate to be frightened of. Noticing them for what they really are, we can begin to differentiate between rational fears versus those which are not. Now, when you come to problems with interpersonal relationships and you have fears related to that, those are challenging because that's based on somebody else's reaction and you have no control over, and 9 times out of 10, no way to predict what the other person is going to do. So learning how to breathe is really, really important. But usually, not ultimately, they both start with you. There'll be some form of sign letting you know if your reactions are exaggerated or not. And so it's essential to remain aware of your surroundings for this reason. Be conscious of your interactions with others during a period of so-called fear. Are you creating tension where tension is not called for? Have you created rifts or noticed a shift in the positive energy of the interactions you used to take for granted? So get kind of curious about your fears. And if you feel comfortable doing so, ask the people that are closest to you to help you identify common patterns. The people who live with us, the people who are around us, our really good friends, the people that we talk to all the time, they notice patterns in us. And so we can, if you feel comfortable and if you feel that you trust them enough, you can ask them, is this a pattern of mine? Do I do this frequently? So get curious about them. When you ask them, other people might notice the patterns even before you do. And if you're really struggling to do so, difficult as it may sound, you can actually talk about them. And you can always reach out to me because I'm certainly willing to help you, and having a conversation with you might be able to alleviate some of those fears or put them in perspective. So mental health issues are really, really challenging and really difficult, but they are vital to recovery. It is so important to us to be able to recover from this. Everything that you've experienced, like just this year, is an opportunity for you to build resilience and to be stronger if you know how to do it. So, is it within your power to change? You may have been kind of like doing this your entire life. It may be habitual patterning for you to respond to stress in this specific way. And so is it within your power to change? Were you just born this way? I had somebody tell me that yesterday. Oh, I was just born this way. And I'm sitting here going, no, you weren't. This is something that you have developed in response to your environment, the way that you were raised, the way that you grew up, the way that you live your life today is a response to your environment. So the answer to this question, is it within your power to change, is absolutely yes, it is. The main problem is that this question often comes up in the middle of the power struggle between maintaining and releasing control of fear. So our own capacity to change is infinite because we have this wonderful plastic brain that they used to think was like set in stone by the time you were 6 years old, which is just ridiculous because people change their minds, they change their habits, they change their lives all the time. And so it's vital that you access the potential to change if you are to really start thriving. So notice if statements such as the following have wormed their way into your everyday dialogue. I'm not capable, or I can't. I'd love to, but I can't because it's not for someone like me. I don't deserve it. I'm not able. So if any of these sound familiar, you may need to change the inner dialogue that surrounds your fears. Can you relate to any of those statements? I know that I've said some of them before. So the most important thing to consider when you're seeking to let go of any fear is to fully acknowledge it for what it is and how it was formulated in your mind. So oftentimes familiarizing yourself with the fear will help you overcome it. So 5 steps to releasing fear. Number 1, step 1, acknowledge the fear. For some of us, even that's hard to do. It's like there's so much shame around the fact that we feel a fear in the first place that it makes it really difficult to be able to accept or acknowledge that you have a fear. Well, you're human, and having fear doesn't make you, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't make you broken. It just makes you normal. Number 2 is release the control surrounding it. So now we've got a fear and we absolutely want to control it. Nobody likes to be out of control. But now release the control surrounding it. Number 3, decide which action can be taken to overcome it. Number 4, take this action to make lasting change. And I might add in there a little bit, don't procrastinate it too long either, because it's not going to get any better if you don't deal with it. And then step 5 is to put all effort, energy, and concern into creating and maintaining that change. So change is not something that we can do without any effort usually. It's not something that we just, wake up different one day. It does require effort on our part to do it. Sometimes just writing down these steps, acknowledge the fear, release the control surrounding it, decide which action can be taken to overcome it, take the action to make lasting change, and then put all of your effort into maintaining that change. Writing those down, maybe sticking them on a note on your mirror, sticking them in the house somewhere where you're going to see them. Take an objective look at the role fear has been playing in your life. It's the most effective and lasting way to make those changes in how you perceive and deal with fear. We have a tendency to make these concrete statements like that always happens to me, or I never get what I want. There's always and never. There's no such thing as always and never except with laws of the universe. You can definitely say, if I drop a spoon, it will always fall to the floor. I have never yet had a spoon that I drop fly up to the ceiling. So rules of the universe are absolute, but always and never for us as mortal beings doesn't work. So let's see. So yoga and meditation. We talk about this. I hope I don't lose you at this point because these are like buzzwords. People talk about these all the time. It isn't just a fitness trend though, because there is so much to be gained from practicing yoga and meditation regularly that the mental health benefits often get forgotten in favor of the more immediately visible and obviously physical effects, such as maybe, toning up or losing weight or something like that. Many of these practices are derived from ancient teachings spanning centuries of knowledge passed down from teacher to student, with the ultimate goal of realizing our true nature and calming the mind to prepare for a stable meditation. So does this sound like something which allows for fear, anxiety, and fluctuating moods to accompany them? Not really, it doesn't. So many people report feeling lighter and more themselves after practicing yoga and meditation. The good thing about this is that it allows us to cultivate a more stable foundation for all difficult emotions, not just fear and anxiety. From this stable base, we're less susceptible to succumb to the onset of fear and anxiety. It doesn't mean that they won't occur. It just means that our capacity to deal with them becomes stronger. This is a resilience technique. Resilience is something that you can actually store up for being able to call upon in times of crisis. So one of the things that's important to understand about meditation is a lot of people struggle with this because they've got squirrel brain. I absolutely have squirrel brain. And when Dr. Mark Atkinson taught me how to deal with squirrel brain, now it's like, oh, I can meditate now. And what he told me was that when those thoughts come, when you're sitting there and you're finally trying to breathe and be quiet and let those, let all the thoughts go and just kind of be present, all these thoughts will come running across your stage of your mind. It's like, oh, an empty space. Yay, we get to go out and play. And so all of these thoughts will come charging through. And we try normally to suppress them. We try to push them down. We try to ignore them. We try to shove them away, make them go away. And so what we do, though, in order to get rid of them, is to acknowledge them. They're just like little toddlers. They want your attention. They want to show you something. And so if you just say, welcome, I see you, I accept you, and then just let it go. It's kind of like they go, yay, I got noticed. I'm accepted. I'm loved. Okay, fine, I can go. And they do. And if you practice doing that, you're going to find that you have more space between the thoughts, and then eventually you'll just be able to control them. But it's another aspect of your body, your thoughts, your mind, your soul just wants to be acknowledged by you. So it's often said that depression occurs when we're lived in the past, and fear and anxiety occurs when we try too hard to live in and predict the future. I said that already. But this means that living in the now becomes an almost impossible task if you're constantly in the past, grieving over whatever horrible thing has happened in your life, or being really anxious about the next horrible thing that's going to happen in your life. So it means that trying to be in the now is an impossible task, but it is an impossible task which is necessary if we are truly to let go of the fear and release ourselves from its grip for good. So through various practices like meditation, mindfulness, and other creative pursuits, you'll find a noticeable difference in the capacity you possess to stay present. So make this a priority as you move forward in your life. It has also proven to be extremely useful in fighting symptoms of other mental and physical illnesses too. I work with people who have PTSD, and just being able to breathe, become present, grounded in the heart, makes it so that the PTSD symptoms are much, much reduced or even gone. So there is countless stories of people who have let go of addictions by letting go of their fears and using meditation to stay present. People have given up on all sorts of things that, especially during this pandemic. I had somebody tell me, I went for a walk with a guy, and he told me that it was so stressful that he'd been an alcoholic for like, I think 11 years. And it was like an alcoholic and a drug addict and all these other horrible things. And he said he was struggling so much with the pandemic that he has begun taking, that he has begun using, sorry, my phone just decided it was going to talk for no reason. It's across the room. He decided that he was going to start using edibles at night. And I said, you're a drug addict. Why would you do that? And he said, because I can't stand to be with me. And so that was the only way that he felt that he could stand to be with himself, is to be in an addicted state. So if you're struggling with issues of addiction or being alone or any of those things, you would think, then why would I want to meditate? Because I'm alone meditating. Well, yeah, but it helps you get in touch with those parts of you that are asking for attention, because you wouldn't have an addiction if you weren't asking for attention, if you weren't asking for something, and that something is always love. So our next practice is gratitude, and it's a practice that, like meditation and yoga, can have a powerful and immediate effect on us. So the areas of the brain which activate during a practice of gratitude are the exact same places that are associated with the release of dopamine, the pleasure and happiness center of the brain. Now, wouldn't it be lovely if you could practice gratitude by hugging somebody? But, in the pandemic, again, we're not even allowed to do that in many cases. But by drawing awareness back into the present moment and away from perceived fears, stories, and mental meanderings, gratitude has the capacity to bring an anxious, fearful person from a bout of uncontrolled anxiety back into the present moment and toward contentment. It really can be that powerful. And I'll give you another tip. just like, Harry Potter seeing the Dementors, after that he was given a big, huge chunk of chocolate. If you're having an anxiety attack, gratitude and chocolate can actually help get you out of the anxiety attack. That's just a little aside. It's not scientifically proven, but it's been proven enough in my life that it makes sense to me. Just make sure it's a high quality, healthy chocolate. Okay, so the fantastic capacity to have both an emotional and physiological response in the body is part of the reason why gratitude is so powerful. It's an all-around healing tool for releasing fear, anxiety, and negativity. So if you don't believe it, just try it. And then what are you grateful for? Think about right now, can you think of 3 things off the top of your head that you are truly grateful for? So I'm grateful that you are here. Thank you very much. It helps so much for me to know that I'm talking to a real live, honest to goodness, breathing person, as opposed to sending this off into a black hole in the ethernet somewhere. So for me today, my first gratitude is that you are here. Thank you very much. So there's a state of consciousness known as the flow state, which is characterized by a period of intense focus and undistracted concentration on one specific task. Studies have shown that those who spend more time in flow experience lower levels of anxiety and fear. So it can be a very effective way to manage this. Many artists describe their most profound artistic insights as stemming from a state of flow. We also might call that intuition, integrity, those kinds of things. It's also known to be a period of low emotional fluctuation, where the areas of the brain associated with learning, happiness, and positivity are active. So if you're in the state of fight or flight all the time, it's really difficult to get into the areas of the brain what work with the learning, happiness, and positivity. And so the conclusion that you can come from that is, in order to experience what it's like to let go of fear and reduce anxiety, we need to spend more time in flow. So what does that mean? Well, flow looks different for everyone. For some, it can be more obvious creative pursuits like writing, journaling, singing, drawing, painting, dancing, but those aren't definitely the only ways that you can find to do that. So activities like gardening, walking, running, reading, cooking, cleaning, and even just being wholly absorbed in your work for a period of time are all ways to spend time in flow. The trick is to find out what this is for you. Now, I have to laugh because of the gardening one. I'm not a fan of gardening, and I bought my house in the springtime when all the trees were so wonderfully gorgeous, and somehow it didn't register in my brain that, trees equal leaves. So I'm not a fan of fall around here because all the trees drop all their leaves and I have to clean them up. Well, I have a tenant who moved in downstairs who started raking up the leaves in my yard. And I said, wow, thank you. And she said, wow, this is just so relaxing for me. It's so meditative. And I just feel so good when I do this. And I'm going, hey, knock yourself out. For her, it's really a wonderful thing. For me, it's something that causes me intense anxiety. So a have to on your list is not something that's going to help you get into the flow. I have to do this. Find something that you actually enjoy. They talk about things that I just got lost in time. I forgot what time it was. I was so absorbed and engrossed in what I was doing. There is something like that in your life. Figure out what it is. So sometimes the most effective way to let go of fear is simply to let go a little bit and learn how to trust. It's been proven that fear and anxiety regularly stem from a deeply ingrained need to control our environment and a fear of trusting it. The reason for this is that anxiety thrives on the possibilities of failure and disaster that it finds in every given situation. Even if there are no apparent threats, anxiety is going to find the worst case scenario in everything and zoom in on them. So does that sound familiar? So while being aware of this is helpful, it's not always enough to combat the intensity of your fears. Building self-trust is essential for this. So now we're going to take you back through some helpful ways to encourage your sense of self-trust. trust. So, trust yourself first. And then also it's really, really important to learn how to trust your higher power, whoever that is. Because, if you could do everything all on your own, you would have done it already. Okay, so self-trust is established through having a real connection to your emotions. Honoring emotions when they arise are precisely what, how, and as they are, and that can be a very difficult task. So release the need for others' opinions and approval. A lot of us, especially if you're a people pleaser, please pay attention to this because it's really important. Let go of the absolute need for somebody else's approval. So lots of us seek approval from peers, family, and partners simply for the rush of dopamine it provides. So like gratitude provides dopamine, so does approval from other people. I know people who have totally, absolutely screwed up their lives in an effort to appease or gain approval from a family member. And the sad thing is when they screwed up their life as badly as they did, they actually lost more respect from their family because their family, didn't approve of what they did. So it's like the only person that you really can gain approval, the necessary approval from, is from yourself. Honor your emotions. Acknowledge it's like, wow, I'm really depressed today. I wonder what that's all about. Kind of explore it and figure out what that is. Or maybe it's like, wow, I'm like hyperventilating. I'm feeling so giddy and so excited. What is that about? Because good emotions are, we talk about good emotions and bad emotions. They don't really have good and bad because there are times when anger and hostility are actually absolutely appropriate. And there are times when laughter and happiness and joy are appropriate. There's even times, believe it or not, when those are not appropriate. Like laughter is probably not usually appropriate in a funeral parlor when somebody has just lost their, beloved, whatever. So we've got to honor our emotions. Maybe you do feel like laughing in that situation. Then explore that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm simply saying explore it. Find out, what is it about? So if you identify your pattern of wanting to please other people and wanting their approval, it's hard to admit and face that you want it so desperately and that you do certain behaviors in your own life in order to accomplish or to gain their approval. But it's going to ultimately strengthen you in the long run to understand that that's an issue for you, that that's the way you work, that that's the way you have decided to live your life in order to get your needs met. Honor that. As we honor our feelings, whether it's crying when we're sad, expressing gratitude when we're grateful, or in allowing an emotion of admiration to surface about someone we love, we create a safe space for that emotion to exist. Even if you feel jealousy, now we think of that as a bad emotion, and it's not a terribly constructive one. It is a negative energy emotion, but acknowledge that too. It's like, wow, I'm feeling kind of jealous right now. I mean, I'd like to have a life like that. I don't have a life like that. So acknowledging it though, and not shaming yourself for your emotions is really, really important. Reducing the resistance surrounding an emotion creates a nurturing space for that emotion, and we can determine whether or not we really want it, whether we want to keep it or not. Just as you'd cultivate a safe space to nurture a child, your feelings must be acknowledged, supported, and given the opportunity to grow, or be acknowledged and given the opportunity to shift. So by doing this, we can begin to allow the problematic emotions to begin the journey toward moving past them. In terms of fear, often just acknowledging the presence of the fear is enough to lessen its intensity. Wow, I'm really scared. Why am I scared right now? Again, it's the acknowledgement of, is there a reason for me to be scared? And then assessing your surroundings and going, there's really not any reason to be scared. So what am I frightened of? The, so I'm sorry. How many of you are guilty of feeling of filling a silence because you're afraid of the silence? Silence can be uncomfortable, especially if you're having difficulty with relationships with other people. And so you might feel it with excited, fill it, not feel it, fill it with excited, irrational speech or actions which don't actually lend themselves to your goals. They neither fulfill your desire nor do they solve or support your fears. You've heard people blather when they're nervous, and it's not helpful. So sometimes sitting in silence with anxiety and fear can prove one of the most daunting tasks in the world. And this is precisely why it's so important to do it. By allowing the fear time to settle, it becomes clear in our minds and we can more easily put things in place to combat it, or we can put it in perspective. But this isn't an invitation to block it out and ignore it. The opposite is in fact true. Stillness forces us to deal with fears and start from a place of stable awareness to change them. Meditation is an excellent tool for this, as is mindfulness, breath awareness, breathing all the way down into your belly, breathing through your heart, or even just taking time to be by yourself in nature. Go hug a tree. I have a tree on my property that's my hugging tree. And I don't care what the neighbors think of me. I go out and I lean against the tree, I pat it, I say hi to it. You know, it makes me feel better. And science has proven that the energy of trees can actually shift you and ground you so that you will feel better. So go out and, lean against a tree, be nonchalant so nobody knows what you're doing. Gain the energy from that tree and ground yourself. So guided meditation, if you have trouble with squirrel brain, sometimes guided meditation is a really good way to be able to get what you need and keep your mind on track to be able to do what you want to do. I recommend using headphones because headphones concentrate the sound in your own body as opposed to having it compete with the garbage truck driving up the street. So the practice of mindfulness involves remaining present and mindful in the moment, no matter what the situation is around us. So this is sometimes easier said than done, especially if we're used to letting the monkey mind or the squirrel brain take over and lead the way, instead of sitting with emotions like fear and anxiety. You'll find that by merely returning yourself to the moment and ensuring that you remain present instead of drifting into imaginary thoughts and what ifs, you will begin to see your fears in a different light. You also get to have the opportunity to find ways to deal with them, because it's kind of interesting. In nature, say if you run into poison oak, there's always an antidote to poison oak within 10 feet of the poison oak. So sometimes with our fears, things work that way too. If we can remain grounded and present and we're feeling fear, sometimes there's an antidote within 10 feet of whatever it is causing us to have the fear. And so try the following steps. Notice the way your body might react physically to external triggers. Finding out our triggers in this way is crucial to gaining the freedom from fear and anxiety we all seek. Sometimes a trigger can be an odor, a smell. Notice the way that your body reacts to that. Notice the small things around you. Beauty in nature, sounds in the distance, or basic bodily sensations we usually take for granted, like your heart beating. Pay attention to your heart beating. You don't usually just sit around and listen to your heartbeat. So if you do that, this is mindfulness. This is becoming present. And by doing these things, you become more able to turn your fears into beneficial surges of energy, which can then be used to your advantage. So now we've already talked several times about the benefits of meditation for releasing fear and anxiety, but there are specific methods that specifically benefit anxiety and fear more effectively than others. So loving kindness meditation is exactly what you would expect it to be. A way for us to direct attention and awareness back towards a part of us which is comprised predominantly of love, kindness, and acceptance instead of fear. Making the shift away from fear towards love is hugely beneficial. So, focusing awareness on the heart during meditation and repetitive heart centered mantras draws our attention away from the threatening side of the experiences and toward the positive, life enriching aspects. So, when I talk about breathing, I'm talking about 5 in and 5 out, slower than normal, deeper than normal. You take a breath, 5 in, you imagine yourself breathing all the way into your belly. But imagine breathing through your heart. So for me, it kind of like comes in like through my nose, bounces off of my belly, and comes up through my heart. Being aware of your heart is really important. This is there's something called Heart Math, which is Heart Math Institute was established 30 years ago. It's in Boulder Creek, Boulder Creek, California. Yes, and they have been studying the heart for like 30 years, and they've discovered that when you breathe through the heart, when you become aware of the heart, when you connect to the heart, and then when you fill your heart with love, gratitude, or appreciation, and you do that, it changes you and it changes things around you as well. So this I can work with. I'd be happy to teach any of you this anytime if you want to reach out to me, because it's really important to know how to do it. It's the most key tool to increasing your resilience and your capacity to deal with stress. So it's funny how we tend to indulge in the things that least serve us. When it comes to fears, letting the imagination run away with us and staying in a negative cycle of fear-indulging habits is the main issue we find ourselves stuck in quite often. When you observe an emotion, fear, or sensation, it's up to you how to deal with it. Indulging in the sensation will strengthen it. Allowing it more time and energy when you know it's damaging is probably the worst thing that you can do. And the hardest part of all this is that the only way through is to be strong and not let the thought take charge. So take note when you start feeling fear or anxiety. Ignore it, choose another outlet for it to be expressed, and let go of the fear. And I don't agree with ignoring it, so I don't know why I wrote that down. Don't ignore it. Acknowledge it. Say, yeah, okay, apparently I'm afraid here. Why am I afraid? So just do that. Even Oprah recommends that you do that. And so this picture is, this guy who's laughing on the computer and stuff like that too. It's like, there's a lot of fear and anxiety that comes from indulging in too much social media. Social media is, everybody's perfect, the highlight reel. We get to see the highlights of their lives. We get to see the good things of their lives. We don't get to see everything else. We don't get to see their depression and their anxiety. That's all we see. And yet we compare ourselves to that. And that indulges you in fear and depression and anxiety and judgment and all sorts of horrible things. So determine how much time you're going to spend on social media. You can get lost in there for days. Just determine that, you're going to turn it off and go do something else. Stop waiting for the right time. Many of us allow fear to dictate important decisions. I'll do it when. We long for the clarity to know exactly what the outcome of everything will be, resisting to take action until the right time presents itself. Unfortunately, this very often leads to the indulgence of fears and a lack of action in any area of life, and there are always consequences. The decision to not make a decision is a decision. It sounds weird, but it is. It's like, okay, I'm not going to make a choice today. I'm just going to kind of sit on it. Well, that's a choice. So the reality is that the right time might never occur, and waiting for it might end up in us postponing our lives and prolonging states of suffering that really don't need to be endured. In short, waiting for the right time means that fear wins. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. None of us are. We're not even guaranteed the next 5 minutes. There's no guarantee for that. So saying that you're not going to go on vacation until you retire, then's when you're really going to take that wonderful vacation, you may not make it, because none of us are given that, quote, right time. Do you want that to happen? So if you're serious about combating fear and releasing yourself from anxiety, it's time to take action, to act against the limiting belief. So what would you do to take action? There is, again, absolutely no right time. So many modern holistic medicinal approaches like functional medicine will advocate the importance of assessing the root causes of illness. This is because there simply isn't any point in treating the symptoms of any illness, being they mental or physical, with drugs or other prescribed methods without addressing the cause. So if you're feeling depressed or anxious and you take antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, it's just putting a blanket over your emotions. It's not dealing with the root cause. By treating symptoms, you reduce only symptoms. In discovering the root causes, you can easily get to the bottom of these root causes and remove them for good, or at the very least, help yourself or a loved one to become aware of what's truly underlying fears and anxieties. So can you see the difference of that? The same goes with fear. You can't possibly hope to remove your fears for good without doing a little bit of inner work and seeking to acknowledge what may be the reason or the origin of the beliefs behind it all. So, I help people with this all the time. The programming that you have received, the beliefs that you have, the anxieties and the fears that you have, they all stem from things that have happened in your past. And if you don't deal with them, then you're not going to be able to really get rid of them for good. You're just going to, as I said, put a blanket over the top of them. And I've had people tell me, oh, I'm going to be on this certain antidepressant for the rest of my life. And I think, wow, why would you do that? Because look at the side effects that come from being on certain medications. Do you really want to be on that for the rest of your life? Well, it's true that it's a lot simpler than having to go back and deal with the garbage in your life, but it feels a whole lot different. So there are so many benefits to looking at alternative medicine ways to do things, alternative healing ways to do things, and it's worth learning more about it. So expressing emotions doesn't come easy to everyone. If you happen to be someone who had your emotions put down as a child, it's like if you were feeling anger and somebody told you, no, you're not feeling anger, then you're like, as an adult, you're totally confused. You don't know what anger is. You don't know what joy is. You don't know what love is. You don't know because you didn't learn what they are. And so emotional intelligence and the language of emotions refer to becoming skillful and aware in the way we experience and express emotions on a regular basis. So how often have you heard phrases like, oh, I'm just stressed out, or, oh, I'm really tired, or something like that to cover up sensations of fear, anxiety, and other related issues? It's one thing to use these words as an excuse not to talk about the roots of the issue, and it's another thing entirely to believe them as a fact. So becoming emotionally literate is vital if you're to begin to take control of your emotional state and let go of emotions that no longer serve you, like fear. Often it's not a case of emotional illiteracy. It's just that many of us require a safe space in which to express these feelings. A lot of us have been in places where it's not safe to express our emotions and express our feelings. Do your best to find some place like that. A coach, a mentor, a friend, somebody that you trust, that you know that you can share your emotions with. Sometimes the benefit of having a coach like me to do this with is that you won't see me all the time. I'm not in your life. I'm not part of your life all the time. And therefore, you can share things with me knowing that I'm never going to share them with anybody. And you don't have to look at me all the time either. So you don't, it's a safe, contained space. It's not going to go anywhere. And a lot of people need things like that. So letting go is the only way to access unlimited contentment and unlimited contentment and satisfaction in life. Whether it's fear, anger, love, or hate, any example of intense emotion can be hugely impacted by cultivating the ability to let go. Is it going to make a difference in 5 years? Is it going to make a difference next week? Is it going to make a difference really tomorrow? Figure out those things. Is it really going to make a difference? Letting go doesn't mean ignoring your difficult emotions. Letting go involves an intricate process of looking at the emotions, acknowledging them, accepting them, and moving through your difficulty to truly process it in and assimilate any important life lessons you will undoubtedly learn from it. Everything that we go through in our life is an opportunity for us to learn and grow. I don't believe that everything happens because it's divinely orchestrated. A lot of things happen because somebody else has made a choice, and we have to suffer the consequences of somebody else's choice. But I do believe that whatever we experience is an opportunity for us personally to learn and grow. So when it comes to fear, the processes might differ slightly from those involved in letting go of, say, unrequited love or even grief. And each fear within this sphere will vary too. If you are suffering with grief, there's a lot of fear in there too. Sometimes it can seem like the most reckless thing to do, but ultimately letting go helps us to cultivate a sense of inner strength in ourselves and trust in the world, which then allows for greatness to manifest outwards. So are you ready to let go? So that's it for today. But believe me when I say that, like, this is just the beginning of the journey. Fear is a persistent sensation that takes a lot of self-awareness, discipline, and energy management to truly overcome. I know that everyone is capable of doing this, and using some of the things we've discussed today will help. Trust yourself. Trust that fear will come and go and always be lurking on the horizon as an outcome of potential outcome, but you don't have to buy into it. You don't have to let fear win. So lots of modern holistic medicinal approaches like functional medicine will advocate the importance of assessing the root cause of illness. I talked about that before. This is because there's simply no point in treating the symptoms without addressing the cause. So what I help people do is I help people address the cause. I help you dig it out, discover it, find it, discover, like, what's keeping me stuck? Why do I keep making these same choices? Why am I afraid? And why the heck am I a people pleaser? And so if you're interested in having a conversation with me, please reach out to me at Michelle with 2 L's at isoulshift.com. And we can talk about having a conversation about how you can move through your fear, your anxiety, and be able to actually learn some things and do some growing, healthy growing during this time of intense fear in the world. So I'm going to stop sharing and let you see my smiley face here for a second. So, whoops, there we go. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you found something helpful. If you did find something helpful, I like hearing from you. I'm so grateful that you're there, and I hope that this helped you in some way. So hopefully you reach out to me, Michelle with 2 L's at isoulshift.com. And I'd love to have a conversation with you to see if there's some way that I can support you during this particular time in your life. So take care, everybody.